Washington Journal continues.
Congressman Buddy Carter here with us this morning, Republican of Georgia, represents the 1st District. Congressman, let's begin with the President Biden's first year in office and his news conference yesterday, where he asked rhetorically, what do Republicans stand for? What did you make of that moment?
Well, first of all, there's no question what Republicans stand for. And I think you can sum it up in one word. We stand for freedom. Freedom from all these mandates that this president has implemented, the vaccine mandates, authoritarian government that he has tried to establish here. We stand for safe borders, for secure borders. We stand for a strong economy where we've got inflation under control. We stand for all the things that the Biden administration thus far has failed at delivering. I mean, if you look at our economy, if you look at our foreign relations, I think that we have the worst foreign relations that we've had in years. The situation that exists now in Ukraine and with Russia, what happened in Afghanistan, which I think was the worst foreign relations debacle in the history of this country, all of those things. This is what Republicans stand for, but mostly what we stand for is freedom.
The Vice President Kamala Harris on Twitter, marking the one-year anniversary yesterday, said over 200 million Americans fully vaccinated, 6.4 million jobs added, passed the American Rescue Plan, passed the bipartisan infrastructure law. We've accomplished a lot in the last year. Congressman?
What they've accomplished is a 7% inflation rate, the highest inflation rate that we've had in decades. What they've accomplished is to allow over 2 million illegal immigrants to come across this border, to the southern border, a very porous border that people are just flowing across right now. But perhaps even more important than the illegal immigrants who are coming across is the illegal drugs that are coming across, the fentanyl. The only thing that has gone down in price in this country in the last year is the price of fentanyl. And that's because so much of it's coming across that border right now. There's enough fentanyl in this country now to kill every American 7 times over. And it's infesting our communities. I was in a parade Monday. I had the opportunity to speak to one of my local sheriffs, and he was telling me about the gang problems that we're having down there, the crime problems that we're having in our communities. And I asked him, so where are these gangs coming from? He said, they're coming from outside the community, and they're infesting our communities. This is exactly what's happening. So for Kamala Harris and the vice president to insinuate or refer to the victories that we've had over the last year, I would have to take offense to that. I would have to say that we've had anything but victories over the past year. And oh, by the way, a year ago, I think it's important to note, I acknowledged that Joe Biden was president. I acknowledged that he had been elected president. And I committed to try to work with him, to try to find common ground, to move this country forward. But everything that this president and this administration has done has been in a partisan fashion. And we have not had the opportunity to work together.
Well, Congressman, let me get your reaction to the speaker then, because yesterday she laid out the idea that Democrats could move forward with a scaled back agenda. I'm wondering if you can work with that. Here's what she had to say.
Now let's talk about health care. So important in the legislation is that millions more people will have access to health care at a very low cost because of what is in the bill in terms of expanding the Affordable Care Act. Let's now talk about child care. Child care in the bill, whether you're talking about the child tax credit, or you're talking about child care, or you're talking about home health care that might include a child or an older sibling or a parent, or you're talking about universal pre-K. All of this lowers cost for care and is transformative in the lives, especially of women in the workforce. So we have to have, if our economy is going to succeed, as you know, we say when women succeed, America succeeds. If we're going to have the full benefit of women and newcomers, and when I say newcomers, people of color who have not been in some of these traditional jobs, to expand what that means, we have to have care at home, whether it's for children or, again, older siblings or parents. So there are big chunks of the bill that have to be contained in the bill. But remember this, that This is a reconciliation bill. So when people say, let's divide it up, they don't understand the process. What can we agree upon? And I'm sure that we can agree upon something significant. Call it a chunk if you want, but whatever you call it, we want it to be able to make a difference in transforming the workplace by honoring work, by respecting the fact that there are families that have to make decisions between home and work, and again, protecting the planet. So I'm optimistic.
Congressman, you heard there from the speaker, she talked about some specific provisions, proposals. Could you get behind any of them?
Well, I'm certainly willing to look at them. And this is the approach that we should be taking in Congress, is to look at these individual situations, to look at these individual policies and to study them instead of having these omnibus bills that include everything and we can never get anything done. Yeah, I want to look at child tax credits. I want to look at home health care. I remember that as I was walking into the Energy and Commerce Committee that I serve on, when we had our part of the Build Back Better, Build Back Broke, whatever you want to call it, of that plan, someone asked me going in, I just suffered the loss of my dad back in July, and someone asked me, how do you feel about home health care after what you've been through? Obviously, that was very important to me, and it is very important to families here in America. Yeah, I want to look at it, but if you look at it within the 1.5, or as it was at that time, it was a $3.5 trillion bill with everything else that's in it, then that's very difficult to do. Now, look, I'm used to that. I served in the Georgia State Legislature. I know what appropriation bills look like, and there's a lot in there that you don't like. There's things in there that you do like. So yeah, if we can break it up, if we can look at it individually and understand how it will fit into the entire picture, then perhaps we could find some common ground on that. But the Democrats thus far have not done that. Now, I will take her at her word. If the speaker is sincere that she wants to look at these things on an individual basis, then let's do just like that. Let's look at it.
We're talking with Congressman Buddy Carter, Republican of Georgia, about this week and here in Washington. We want to take your calls and comments and questions. Democrats dial in at 202-748-8000, Republicans 202-748-8001, and Independents, your line, 202-748-8002. You can also text us, first name, city, and state, at 202-748-8003. Congressman, what has President Biden done right in the first year?
Well, it's hard to think what he's done right, to be quite honest with you. You know, there have been so many missteps and so many things that we have to point to and that we're suffering through right now with inflation, with the economy, with the energy crisis. I mean, the very first thing he did when he got into office was to stop the Keystone XL pipeline. And ever since then, it's been a war on fossil fuels. Look, I serve on the Select Committee for Climate Change, and I believe in climate change. I believe we need to address it. I'm a member of the Conservative Climate Caucus and have gotten numerous awards for my work in conservation. But at the same time, you know, you have to look at this from a perspective of what is best for the economy and what's best for our environment. This war on fossil fuels has got to stop. It is costing people, and it's costing people, and it's actually costing lives. I mean, there are people who are suffering now through high energy bills that they can't afford to pay. This is ridiculous, all these things that are going through. It's hard for me to quite honestly point out something right that this president has done in this administration thus far. I mean, look, I'm open-minded. I want to work. As I said before, I committed early on that I wanted to find common ground and move this country forward. But thus far, it's been very difficult to find that common ground.
Lynn is in Connecticut, Democratic caller. You're up first for Congressman Buddy Carter. Go ahead.
Yes, hello. When asked what are Republicans for, you said Republicans are for freedom. Well, guess what? Democrats are for freedom, too. Growing up, you needed to get vaccines. Did you lose your freedom? Biden wants to save lives. Instead of complaining, what are Republicans' plans for COVID and saving your fellow Americans' lives? Please be specific. Thank you.
Well, and look, yes, you're right. We did have mandatory vaccines when we were growing up, and certainly that was important. Look, I am pro-vaccine. I went through the clinical trials myself. I wanted to set a good example as a healthcare professional, as a pharmacist, a member of the Doctors Caucus, a member of Congress, and I did just that. I am pro-vaccine. I am anti-mandate. I get it. I understand that people have reservations about what they inject into their body, especially one that has been that was formulated and it was approved in such a short period of time. Although I do feel like it is safe and effective, and I encourage people to get it, I don't think it should be mandated. I think it's perfectly fine to be pro-vaccine and anti-mandate. Look, I encourage, as I say, everyone to get the vaccine because I believe it's safe and effective, but it ought to be an individual decision. It ought to be a decision that you make between you and your physician, between you and your pharmacist, between you and your family, not to be mandated by the government. Joe Biden said himself that the federal government can't control the pandemic. They can't control the virus. Well, if you can't control it, why are you mandating the vaccine? We look at the SCOTUS ruling and we see that finally private companies were given the right to not have to impose these mandates, and I applaud them for that. However, look at what we're saying to healthcare workers. Healthcare workers 6 months ago, 9 months ago were our heroes. They are the ones who have been at the front line. Now we're telling them if you don't get vaccinated, you're going to be fired. That is ludicrous. It is just outrageous that that is happening. So yes, I'm all for the vaccine. I do believe that we are reaching a point very quickly. We have to look and see what we're doing in the way of therapeutics. We haven't put enough emphasis on therapeutics. We need to concentrate on that. And I'm not sure we're asking the right question. You know, in pharmacy school, they taught us, make sure you ask the right questions. Well, we've been asking, are you vaccinated? When we should be asking, do you have antibodies? Do you have immunity? That's what we should be asking.
Mike in Crescent City, Florida, independent.
Yeah, Congressman, I would like you to answer a question now. On this Build Back Better plan, the first thing that comes out of your mouth, how are you going to pay for it? Now, I've looked at some research. In the last 8 years, we pumped almost $2 billion into the Ukrainian military aid, almost $1 billion since October of last year into Afghanistan for humanitarian. Where did that money come from? I never heard any debate on that. And how is that being paid for?
Well, look, we've got to have a serious talk in this country, and we've got to make some hard decisions about what we're going to do. I'm blessed. I have 6 grandchildren. I'm concerned about the $30 trillion in debt that we have here that we're leaving our grandchildren and their grandchildren. We've got to address that. As a member of the Budget Committee, I take it very seriously. As a member of Congress, I take it very seriously. And yes, we have got to address this. Now, you can point to waste and abuse and fraud and abuse in all categories and all departments of our budget. And certainly it's important that we look at those. But when you talk about Build Back Better, and remember, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, actually said, hey, if you start these programs like this, like they are proposing here, this is going to cost over $5.5 trillion. And that is something we cannot afford in our country. And it's certainly something that I'm glad Build Back Better is dead now. If we're going to look at it in chunks, as they say, okay, let's look at it in chunks. But this whole omnibus bill that they were talking about, this is ridiculous. This is something we cannot incur. We cannot add more to the already, what we're seeing already is something that I'm not sure we can ever get over in the way of our national debt right now.
We'll go to Massachusetts. Jerry in East Hampton, Republican. You're next.
Hi, I'd like to thank Mr. Carter for his hard work, and I'd like to ask if maybe when the Republicans get in charge, they can ask the Democrats if they'd like to blow up the filibuster and change the rules and see the big difference in them like we did a few years ago. And maybe we can get an investigation into Hunter Biden and all of his dirty dealings in the Biden crime family. It's absolutely ridiculous that nobody ever wants to look into that, and we keep hearing all about the Trump family that's been investigated for years now. What about the Biden crime family?
Okay, so is that on the agenda, Congressman, if Republicans win back the House?
Well, right now we've got a full agenda. When we do win back the House, and we will, I'm very confident. And we're not overconfident. We're not taking it for granted. We're working very hard. There are only two ways to run: unopposed and scared. And we're going to be running scared. We're going to make sure that we take back the majority, because we've got big challenges in this country right now. When you talk about the economy, when you talk about energy, when you talk about crime, when you talk about all of these things that we've got to address in this country, it's gonna take up a lot of our time. Look, I'm not one of these vengeful persons who thinks, tit for tat. I mean, I think it was Gandhi that said, if we lived by the rule of an eye for an eye, we'd all be blind. But at the same time, I do resent what's going on, particularly with the Trump family and with everything that they are trying to do to that family. There are times when I do get it. I understand how President Trump can feel like, you're coming after my family. I mean, I love my family, and they come after my family, then I'm certainly going to be upset, just as he is. And who can blame him for that? But at the same time, we've got big problems in this country. The Republicans, we're going to have our hands full. Yes, there should be investigations into some of the things that the caller mentioned there, and there will be. I'm very confident that the Oversight Committee will do their job and that they will look into things that should be looked in.
William in Houston, Democratic caller.
Good morning, Congressman. I got a question I want to ask you, but first I want to let you know I'm an oil analyst in the industry here in Houston. The Keystone Pipeline, it was not have provided no more than temporary jobs, and that oil was not going to be processed and benefit the United States, okay? Everybody here in Houston in the oil industry knows that. And then I got a question to ask you, and I just want a straight answer. Why are they closing voting facilities in minority neighborhoods in Georgia?
Why are they closing voting facilities in minority neighborhoods in Georgia? To my knowledge, they're not closing voting facilities in minority neighborhoods in Georgia. Look, I applaud the Georgia State Legislature for what they did with the Election Integrity Act. What they did was to make voting easier and cheating harder. The president and the vice president were down in Atlanta, I guess it was a week ago, and here they are, they're talking about how suppressive the voting rights in the state of Georgia are. However, if you look at the home state of the president of Delaware, if you look at the home state of the vice president in California, our voting rights here in the state of Georgia are much better than they are in those states, and than they are in New York and other liberal hotbeds. We should be holding up the voting regulations, rules and regulations in the state of Georgia as a template for the way that the other states should be doing it. We are setting a great example here. I applaud the state legislature. I think that what they've done is to restore faith into our voting system. Keep in mind that it was 4 years ago that Stacey Abrams was the one hollering, oh, this election was stolen, this gubernatorial election was stolen. Well, let me tell you, this Election Integrity Act, it gives people confidence again, and I applaud the state legislature for what they've done. I'm very proud of what we've done here in the state of Georgia in our elections.
Pembroke Pines, Florida, Nelson, a Republican. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Mr. Carter, I believe that I have agreed with just about everything you have stated. You have already answered a couple of the questions that I had before, but I have one that I've talked about in the past on C-SPAN, and no one seems to have the courage to really confront this question, which is Joe Biden is clearly a sick man. He clearly has cognitive problems. It's getting worse. And I am concerned about the leadership and the security of this country, which is supposedly being led by this individual. As a congressman, how are you all going to confront this very real problem and this very real threat to the security of our country? Thank you very much.
Look, you bring up a great point and something that should be addressed. We've talked about this at length in the Doctors Caucus, and we are very concerned. We're very concerned about our president. Look, I pray for our president, and I would venture to say that all of our country should pray for our president and for his physical well-being. However, if it reaches a point where he is not able to perform his functions, I hope that he, along with those people around him, will acknowledge that and will do something about it. It's exceptionally important that all of us and members of Congress as well, that we address that. One of my colleagues in the Doctors Caucus has asked for a cognitive test, and thus far that I don't think that has happened, but certainly that's something that we're all concerned with. But make no mistake about it, I pray for our president, as do I think all members of Congress do.
What are those discussions like between you and the other doctors in the caucus?
Well, we're very concerned. We're very concerned about his physical state and his mental state, but at the same time, you know, that's a role that those people around him, they have to accept. Now we can, we certainly can put pressure on him, and we try to in that respect, but at the same time, look, this is serious. These are big decisions. What's going on in Ukraine right now? Folks, this could lead to World War III. Don't people realize that? And don't think for one moment that as soon as the Beijing Olympics are over with, that China is not going to be in Taiwan. They are. We've got to be concerned about what's going on in the world stage. This man is portrayed as weak and ineffective. And these North Korea, Iran, all these countries are going to be taking advantage of this. We've got to be concerned about this. We can't just turn a blind eye to this. We've got to acknowledge it, and we've got to address it.
Helen in New York, Independent.
Hello?
Yes, good morning.
Hi, I got a couple of things to say. First of all, you're telling about Joe Biden didn't want to get along with you guys. Well, I remember Mitch's mouth saying that he would never work with the Democrats out of his own mouth. Then also, you talk about the Mexicans coming in. Okay, first of all, we're all gods. We are all nations as gods. We're all creation, God's children. Second of all, when he's complaining about the Mexicans coming in. What about the people? How you guys are reacting? That's not wild and stuff.
What's the reaction, Helen, so that the congressman can respond to you?
The reaction to people, they're coming in, they're bringing in drugs, and there's already around every country there's drugs. New York has every people of the country. Where do all the drugs come? You're blaming all about the Mexicans.
Okay. Congressman?
Look, I don't know if the caller has had the opportunity to go to the southern border. I have. I went twice last year. I went once as a member of the Doctors Caucus to make sure that the unaccompanied children were being taken care of. I went again when President Trump was down there. It is important that you get down there and that you see it firsthand, and you see the problem that we've got down there, and you see the great risk that these people are taking by coming to that border. You know that those cartels, they control those borders. They have wristbands that are different colors in order to let the cartel members know whether they have paid already or whether they still owe them money. And let me tell you, if you're an illegal immigrant and you're trying to come across that border and you haven't paid the cartels, they'll kill you. They will kill you. It's so dangerous for those people who are trying to come across here. And yet the United States and this president and this administration, by their actions and by their policies, are encouraging people to come to that border. That is inhumane. That is something that's got to stop. Here we've got a president of the United States who has never been to the border. Here we've got a vice president, when she's supposed to be the border czar, who went to El Paso, 800 miles away from the epicenter in McAllen. That's ridiculous. We cannot continue to ignore this border. A country without borders is not a country at all. We are a country of law and order, and we have to enforce that border.
If Republicans win in the midterms, Congressman, what do you do about the border?
We start building that wall again. We start implementing the stay in Mexico policy again. We make it clear, look, we welcome people to come into this country. There is a process by which you can come in here. And we need you and we want you to come in here, but we want you to do it the right way. That's what we want. And that's the way it should be. But now what we've got here with this porous border that we're experiencing now, this is totally ridiculous.
Do you allow work visas?
Yes, we do have. And look, I represent South Georgia. I represent a big ag community, a big forestry community. We depend on these workers. We depend on them in our economy down with tourism. And we need these workers to come here. So yeah, we need to look at all of these visa programs and see what we can improve on. We acknowledge that.
Congressman, what do you hope gets worked on next in the House?
Well, certainly we've got some deadlines that are coming up. We've got the appropriations that are coming up. We've got one that's coming up next month. We have a CR that went through, I believe, February 17th or whatever it is. But nevertheless, that's got to be addressed. I hope that we will see each of the 12 different departments addressed and different agencies that we need to have the appropriations for. I hope we don't have another CR, but if that's what it's going to be, then, that'll be up to the Democrats, really. But okay. I do hope, and I do feel like there is room for some bipartisan legislation to get through. I believe that Representative Wilds mentioned earlier about telehealth. I've got a bill now that deals with telehealth that I'm hoping will be part of a package in the Energy and Commerce Committee that will help us to
And Congressman, as you know, the House is coming in for a pro forma session. I apologize for the abrupt ending, but we've got to end. So we thank you for your time. We'll go to the House now for this quick